yet another internet shutdown in strife torn Manipur. A first in Manipur in 2024, but the extent of internet shutdowns in Manipur itself have been extreme over the last 1 year. Between May to December 2023, there was an internet shutdown for 212 days. In fact, there was Manipur's longest suspension of 142 days at a stretch, impacting at least 3.2 million people. Shutdowns over fear of social media triggered violence. In fact, let's just look at some of the longest internet suspensions in India. Kashmir, in Jammu and Kashmir. From August 4, 2019 to February 6, 2021, 552 days of internet suspensions in a span of 2 years. Around the abrogation of Article 370, a preventive shutdown for Manipur, we've just seen the 212 days of internet shutdown in 2023. Kargil, Ladakh, between August 4th, 2019 to December 27, 2019, 145 days of internet suspensions over Article 370's abrogation again. In fact, a 2023 report states India leads the world in internet shutdowns. In fact, for the 6th year in a row, internet has been disrupted at least 116 times in 2023. 41% of 283 global shutdowns have been in India. 48%. Just in 2023, and 59% of these shutdowns have exclusively targeted mobile networks. Look at this report by internetshutdown.in. Look at the numbers of internet shutdowns. Just look at them. And to give you a sense, it's, look at 2016, 31, 17, 79, and then you have 134, 106, 129, 177, and 2023 had 96. In fact, there have been Supreme Court rulings on suspensions of internet. Internet access is a fundamental right. Suspensions must be temporary, limited, lawful, necessary, proportionate. Indefinite suspensions are not allowed. Orders must follow principle of proportionality. Orders should be publicly available. That's what the Supreme Court has said. Let's just try and look at the different aspects of this. And as usual, we promise you a 360-degree view. I'm being joined at this point by Apar Gupta, who is an advocate and co-founder for Internet Freedom Foundation. I'm also being joined by Kanchan Gupta, who's a senior advisor with the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Apar Gupta, first to you.
Yes.
Do you see the number of the reasons behind the internet shutdowns in India, as have been mentioned, quite in line with the spirit of what the Supreme Court has ruled?
I think it's inconsistent with what the Supreme Court ruled. In fact, I was a part of that case. It's called Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India. And in that case, the Supreme Court had directed that whenever the internet is shut down, a copy of the order, the legal order, which directs or is sent to the internet service provider, someone like Bharti Airtel or Jio, to shut down the services in that district or in that state, needs to also be published and made publicly available so people know the reasons why the internet has been shut down. And the court had expressed hope at that point in time that this kind of transparency would also lead to some degree of public accountability, that our public authorities would be a little much more careful while issuing these kind of internet shutdown orders. However, what's happened over a period of time is that while a lot of these orders are being published, it has not really impacted any kind of probity in issuing the internet shutdown orders. Just quickly coming to the case at hand in Manipur, I'd just like to mention one or two things. I'll quickly sum up here. So when the violence first started on May 3rd, 2023, if you look at the internet shutdown order, which was passed in a few hours, and if you look at the internet shutdown order, which has been passed this week itself, the duration of the internet shutdown, the phrasing within that internet shutdown order, all of that is more or less the same. It appears like a cyclostyled copy. So let's say even after a year, the reasons between and the comparison between that is a template. It's not actually a reasoned order. It's a mechanical order which is extended again and again by the state government. So I think there are a lot of problems here. The second point I just want to quickly wrap up with is that the data which you have furnished before all of us is on the basis of tracking of news reports and these orders, which is done by independent rather than public authorities. And here, the Department of Telecom in the Union of India has been has been actually directed by the Standing Committee of IT in its 37th Action Taken report, in which it has asked the Department of Telecom, please tell us what are the reasons for internet shutdowns. Please tell us the number of internet shutdowns in the different states, because it's pursuant to a central regulation. And here, the Department of Telecom continues to be evasive. So I think there is a need for greater seriousness and probity whenever internet shutdown is ordered, because it's not only about watching Netflix, it impacts people in the sum total of their lives, financially, socially, family relationships, etc.
Right. Mr. Kanchan Gupta, if you could come in at this point, internet is really not an option anymore. It's no longer a luxury. It's literally the lifeline for any society. And if you break it down further, for any family as you were. I believe we don't have Kanchan Gupta with us. We'll try and get him back. But Apar Gupta, if I can ask you, just take this on with you. Now, when you look at the telecom suspension rules itself, it's very clear that you can go ahead and allow for these suspensions. However, it does say that order must specify duration, area, reasons for suspension. Now, an order like this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give out the explicit reasons each time. So even if the point that you mentioned doesn't really mean it's violative of the existing laws. Is this a correct interpretation?
No, it's incorrect. Any kind of administrative order which is passed, which restricts a fundamental right, needs to contain reasons behind it. This is the very basic principle behind it. So the regulation which you are reading, which indicates certain specific particulars which need to be contained within an order, those actually tie to a certain form of reasoning which is then present within the order itself. And even it defies common reason. Let's say that, okay, both of us disagree. Okay, both of us say that, hey, I think that they're complying with the letter of the law. Okay, but is it really in the spirit of things for any kind of order to be passed as a cyclostyle again and again after every 5 days, renewed for a period of 143 days from May 3rd, 2023 to September 23rd, 2023? And also one more thing. We forget that when the internet was restored in Manipur on September 23rd, 2023, it just took 2 more days, one viral video for the internet to again be shut down there. So as much as the streak was broken there, these orders were continued. What I'm saying is that if there are police inputs, if there is a specific amount of restriction where orders are issued only specific to a district, or if there is some kind of actual apprehension which is actually born and reasoned and then placed in the public domain, there'll be a higher level of confidence, because it is not only my perspective. In fact, the student groups itself from Manipur, or also let's say, okay, let me come away from Manipur to states such as West Bengal and Rajasthan. So in Rajasthan, which also has a high number of internet shutdowns, the reason quite often is not civil strife, but it is to prevent cheating in exams and leaking of papers. And this is before this became a very big issue. So the government used to shut down the internet, let's say in the city of Jodhpur for 2 days when there was a competitive exam for state recruitment, let's say of constables or for post office officials. And what used to happen is that within those 2 days, the people who were studying for other kind of competitive exams, for people who were tourists who went to places like Jodhpur, couldn't do a UPI transaction, and the businesses suffered, the people who were locally present there suffered. So even if these reasons are there, quite often they are not justified. But quite often, these reasons itself are not questioned by people to a deeper extent because the officials are not giving us the details why they are proceeding with it. What lives have actually been saved by shutting down the internet when the loss is very certain. The economic opportunity, the loss of people not being able to sit for exams, take classes, get medical help, all of those harms are clear. But the anticipated lack of or the anticipated prevention of loss of life and property, that is not clear. And if the internet shutdowns are so successful, why is the violence still continuing in Manipur today? It's been more than a year.
Would you be no, but would you be able to help us understand in the larger picture, in the global picture, while there are reports that say that India is having the highest number of shutdowns, in the global picture, how does it work like? If you look at the biggest democracies.
Democracies or constitutional republics don't shut down the internet. What they usually approach any kind of internet restriction with is per se blocking a specific web page quite often. Okay, because that is a much more proportional approach to web censorship, or they locate the person who's engaged in illegal conduct rather than shutting down the internet by itself. This is not done usually. There are some instances where for certain periods of time, certain telecom services are delayed or buffered. So this does happen in riot-like situations, but India is an exception. In fact, when I quite often meet international experts who work on technology regulation, they are always surprised when I say something like internet shutdown, and they ask me, what does it mean? To them, it is a completely alien concept. This is only reminiscent of conflict zones in Africa or completely unstable countries which are there in the Middle East or in other parts of the world, which don't have stable democratic rule of law systems, which India boasts of. So I think so. India is an outlier here. And it is also completely opposed to our policy of digital India and digital services, whereby it inflicts a large amount of damage on ordinary people. So we are not matching a global trend at all.
No, but Apar Gupta, let's look at how India really, let's look at the scenario right now. We are looking at a huge crisis in Manipur. On one hand, you have the right of citizens, right to life, you have right to communication, you have so many aspects which is literally fundamental to right to life. There's other situation where the internet, the social media poses a huge level of new threats that the government says is difficult to contain, and therefore out of fear of violence due to rumors on social media, they resort to it. And in Manipur or in Jammu and Kashmir, this has been primarily stated as a repeat reason in orders after orders, that is fear of violence due to threat of rumors on social media, misinformation, disinformation per se.
So I think a lot of, first let's consider the role of social media today and how public officials use it. Our Prime Minister has an active social media presence, as well as most members of the Union Cabinet. Most chief ministers use social media, and in fact, the Chief Minister of Manipur uses Twitter even when the internet is shut down within Manipur. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that it's not as if our public officials are enjoying something which ordinary citizens are being deprived from, but there's an inherent link. Let's say I don't like the Prime Minister or I like the Prime Minister, it doesn't matter. But I primarily interact with the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister of my state on the basis of their social media presence, right? So it's an effective way for them to put the message across. Okay. And here, especially when you're dealing with not a technical problem, not like one rumor which has spread across the state, but a deep-seated ethnic conflict, it is very important for the political leadership to build trust. How do they do it? They do it by reaching out to people. Okay. And here social media does play an important role. I'll just cite one or two reports to support my point. The first is a qualitative study which is called of sieges and shutdowns, which was conducted in Manipur a few years ago, in fact in 2017, and it covered one of the biggest rallies in Imphal, which was on the basis of certain kinds of sexual violence, and there were a lot of female protesters there. And in fact, it led to state accountability, and it was completely coordinated on Facebook, Facebook Messenger, and WhatsApp. And the second one is a quantitative analysis by a researcher called Jan Rasdek, who has quantitatively studied internet shutdowns and acts of violence in India. And he says, and I quote, violent mobilization seems to grow in intensity during internet blackouts, like a pressure cooker. So, which does not have the ability to let off steam. So, if you break the communication channel between the political leadership and the citizenry, there is a greater tendency for violence in such deep-seated conflicts rather than this internet shutdown working to the favor of restoring law and order. That would be how I would perceive it. And in fact, experience is showing if from May 3rd, 2023, this internet shutdown strategy has not worked, it may not work in future as well.
Right. Okay, Apar Gupta, thank you so much for joining us with those insights. I guess there is a lot to maneuver around this. Big questions that you have raised. Let's try and look for some answers as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm also being joined at this point by Manish Bariyar, who's a political analyst, Advocate APS Khadial, who is a spokesperson for Congress, and Karuna Nandi, who is a senior Supreme Court advocate. Mr. Bariyar, do you want to respond first? We had Apar Gupta say right now that all of this seems to be like a big blot on India when you look at the world across the countries across the globe, how they handle particularly the democracies. How do you look at what's happening? I mean, let's look at facts. 500 plus days of internet shutdown in one part, 145 days at a stretch in Manipur at the other part. I mean, what are we really looking at, Mr. Manish Bariyar?
Yeah, good evening to you. So I'm sorry I joined a bit late, so I could hear him a bit. And your voice is quite low. I don't know if you can hear me. Is my voice clear to you?
I can, loud and clear, loud and clear. I can hear you loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Okay. So, nobody really wants a suspension of internet, and we are talking to each other on the basis of that. So I can understand what it is. But I think one has to look at 2 points. One is that India is a very large, diverse, and a country where you have a lot of different kinds of critical, situations as far as security is concerned. So we have almost like now 3 borders that are pretty dangerous for us. And we have, enemies from all 3 sides, with Bangladesh now becoming hostile. And we suffer for a lot of, insurgencies. So it's very unfair to compare India with other countries because not too many countries are as large with such high population and with such kind of difficult situations which political leadership and the general executive and the administration faces. Now, having said that, I would say that there are a lot of situations where such kind of clampdown might be required. For example, let's take up there are hacks and there are power installations. The hacking, we are hearing that those kind of things are happening. Cyber attacks are there. Now, in those cases, the government has to restore to temporary shutdown. Now, I'm not in favor of long-term kind of a shutdown. I did, hear what the gentleman was speaking about Manipur situation, and I would agree partially with him. A long-term clampdown is something which can make people restless. But largely, if you see over a period of time, it is done to diffuse that particular moment or that situation, and not to really take it for a long period of time. So I would say that yes, it's a very thin balance between public security and law and order, as well as freedom of expression and speech. And, the authorities have to really find the right kind of a balance. But to say that, India doesn't allow freedom of expression or speech would be taking it to too far, because I feel that, we are pretty balanced in the way we utilize,
No, there
except
is no
some
question
bizarre
that India
situations
has
like
enough
I have
freedom of
heard that
speech.
examination hall,
But the
cheatings are
question
happening
here
and
that we
then
are
people
looking
are
at is,
clamping it down.
are these
Except those things,
long
everything is, I
periods
think,
of internet
within the
shutdowns
limits.
uh, which India has seen over the last year or 2 years, these long, I mean, look at it, 552 days of shutdown in Jammu and Kashmir, um, 212 days of internet shutdown in Manipur. You have 145 days of internet shutdown in Kargil and Ladakh. This is from 2019. In 2019 in Kargil, Manipur, of course, 23 practically much of May to December 2023. It started again in Manipur. You have Jammu and Kashmir between 2019 to 2021, 552 days. These are really long stretches that we are talking. Can I just get an advocate APS Kharyal? Advocate APS Kharyal, it's not like it's under the BJP-led center alone that this is happening. Even in Congress-ruled governments, this has been happening in the past. Not just Congress. In fact, if you look at political parties practically across the political line, internet shutdown has been a reality, whether it be the Mamata Banerjee government, Ashok Gehlot government. We've had instances in Revant Reddy's government as well. Or, of course, under the center, we had these long stretches that I have mentioned as well. But how do you look at what it is happening vis-a-vis the right to communicate, the right to life, the right to practice livelihoods versus what the government is saying, very, very sensitive law and order threats? I think you'll have to unmute yourself, Mr. APS Kharyal. Can't hear you, Mr. APS Kharyal. You are not audible at all. Okay, I think our team will have to work with you on fixing. I think we're just having a bad tech day from losing Mr. Kanchan Gupta to advocate APS Kharyal. But let's just try and fix this. Karuna Nandi, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to very quickly weigh in what we were discussing at this point? There are those who are saying the internet suspensions under the BJP-led center or BJP-led governments have been extreme. But if you look at the history of it, no political party that has been in government can wash their hands of repeated internet suspensions for varying reasons. Where do you see the line drawn?
I think we must understand that when one government lowers the bar, then other governments follow, and it's a race to the bottom and beyond. India has topped the charts, not in anything positive, but in being the top in terms of internet shutdowns across the world. Now, we must ask ourselves that what is the common person doing in this situation? And how is the common Indian suffering? You may say that the government has a duty to prevent violence, and that is absolutely true. There's no question of that. But why does the government not follow the Anuradha Bhasin judgment, regardless of whether it's the state government and whether it's the central government, whether it's the state government, whichever government it is? And I'm not taking the names of parties. Why? Why am I not taking the names of parties? Because a number of parties, a number of governments have shown this kind of impunity in terms of shutting down the entire internet rather than countering disinformation, rather than making sure that their investigations are better so that they are catching the perpetrators, rather than looking at, is the goal of the restriction legitimate? Yes, of course, limiting violence is legitimate, it's important. The restriction must be necessary, and this is where most governments fail. They do not look at alternatives. They do not look at whether alternative measures are efficacious or indeed whether they exist at all. And they do not understand that it is the least restrictive measure that must be taken. So therefore, we have people who can't get paid for their work under Manrega. Manrega gets suspended. So the poorest people and their daily work, because so much has been digitized today. If you want to take somebody to the hospital, we saw, in fact, that this conversation got interrupted because somebody's digital access was not working. So that voice doesn't get heard. And when you are sitting in isolation and there are rumors going around, it's far more likely that you're going to fall prey to disinformation rather instead of government, along with others, countering disinformation in a responsible manner. So we've just, I think, as a nation, have to step away from these internet shutdowns and start to understand better restrictive, less restrictive measures, and not to take away people's livelihoods, people's access to healthcare, people access to, the daily necessities, the absolute basic necessities of life, many of which are now accessed through the internet.
Advocate APS Khadial, I believe, is back with us at this point. Advocate APS Khadial, please go ahead. How do you look at what's happening, considering you may say this is a recurring point, a very sensitive point under the current government, but as we also have data across party lines, this has also been a reality.
Thank you. First and foremost, I hope I am clearly audible. I hope I am
Yes,
clearly
you
audible.
are. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Number one, see, the Bharatiya Janata Party's government is accustomed to doing away with the rights of people, is accustomed to violating their fundamental rights. I'd remind the Bharatiya Janata Party that on September 2023, when you restored internet access in Manipur, it turned out to be the second largest internet blackout in the history of India, the second largest, which lasted for around 143 days. And the biggest casualty was the fundamental rights of people, their right to freedom of speech and expression, their right to internet, their right to information, their right to practice any profession by the means of internet, and many more rights. If we were to talk majorly, a report of top 10 VPN suggests that India in 2023, in half of 2023, lost 2,091 crores due to internet suspensions. And when they do such things in order to censure the voice of people, see, number one, I'll give an example. Internet suspension is not the problem. The usage of it by the Bharatiya Janata Party is the problem. Now, knife is used by doctors to treat patients. And that very knife is used by criminals to kill people, to hurt people. The problem is that the Bharatiya Janata Party uses it to basically do away with protests, to do away with criticism. If the BJP does not want to hear criticism, they do not want to hear criticism, they would censor you. And because of that, so many cases have been filed in various high courts and the Honorable Supreme Court. And we need the Bharatiya Janata Party to stop doing that. Because of this, businesses suffer. So many businesses run with the help of internet. The sales happen, the operations happen. The entire modus operandi gets disturbed and distorted because of the Bharatiya Janata Party's danda tantra, because of their autocratic measures that the Bharatiya Janata Party keeps resorting back to. Then the students suffer a lot because of this. Students nowadays prefer e-learning. That they read, learn, are basically taught by the medium of internet, and the Bharatiya Janata Party does not care about them either. Jammu and Kashmir, people in Jammu and Kashmir have suffered a lot. And I demand the Bharatiya Janata Party, it was a promise after 370 is done away with, no more terrorism would be witnessed. It will be reduced to zero. But the opposite of that happened. Then the third casualty is the healthcare sector.
I think let's just stick to the point, Mr. Khadial. We're talking about internet suspensions, the discourse around it. What you are discussing or you are mentioning right now is another debate, and we will get to that. We have done that in the past as well. But very quickly, Mr. Barrier,
if I may just complete just one line. See, when they suspend the internet in Jammu and Kashmir, I was telling you how the people are affected because of that. Last point. Not just this, healthcare gets affected because of that. Journalism gets affected because of that. International reputation of India. There are international repercussions to it. Our reputation. And then the Bharatiya Janata Party says, do not go abroad. Do not criticize us. Criticism of the Bharatiya Janata Party is not criticism of India. If they will do this, they will hear criticism. But the Bharatiya Janata Party needs to do just one thing. Stop suppressing the voices of people.
Okay, that line is going to take us into a very different discourse and and I just don't want to digress to that, Mr. Khadial. Sticking to what we are discussing and taking the points from you, Manish Barrier, the big challenge at this point is, while the government claims these are extraordinary situations, if they claim so, if they claim that there is worry about threat to safety, security, law and order because of rumors, misinformation, disinformation on social media, as Karunanandi pointed out, is there a system in place in 2024 to find out which could be the least restrictive measure to really resort to, rather than a knee-jerk reaction that the situation is escalating, the violence has escalated, and therefore let's clamp down?
Yeah, so I would say that was a fair suggestion. But then the ground situation, if she ever goes to those situations. So for your program, I spoke to some of the military people, the former, in fact, army men and officers. And once I got to know this program is there, so I was generally taking their perspective, and they said that there is a chain of command that needs. So again, I'm not holding a brief for them because that's a perspective of one set of people who are clamping down. But then I think it's important to also hear the other side. They said it's a chain of commands. So let's take up. We have surrounded a group of militants. Immediately, the militants will, on Facebook and social media, will put out that we are surrounded. And then the villagers from all around and the supporters from all around will come and will surround the entire village. And now the military men know that they can't take them out because they are going to be a collateral damage. Now, I would like to really ask a question. What do they do in certain situations like this? Now, if you look at the number of internet days that have been really suspended, they are the places where they are very extraordinary situation. Let's take up in Manipur. Now, people can criticize, obviously, the leadership, and one should. But then give me a solution. What solution do you have? So, ma'am was speaking about that alternative. So can she elaborate on what alternative suggestions would diffuse such situations?
Okay, before I go to Ms. Karunanandi on it, KPS Khadial, do you want to very quickly come in? And not just what Mr. Barrier is saying, even when you look back at what the Congress government has done possibly during the Gehlot government, or even, other governments, of bringing in these internet suspensions, or even to what Manish Barrier is speaking and the references that we are making to J&K and Manipur. What are your alternatives, practically speaking?
Number one, like I gave an example of how a doctor uses a knife to treat and a criminal uses to kill or hurt. The Bharatiya Janata Party has time and again crossed lines. And not just that, the Section 5, Clause 2 of the Indian Telegraph Act 1885, read with temporary suspension of telecom services, it says that union or the state secretary is empowered to do so. Right. Now, State Home Secretary is empowered to do so. And there cannot be an internet suspension order for more than 15 days. Now, the Bharatiya Janata Party needs to explain this violation of the law as well, how and why the Bharatiya Janata Party has been violating the law. And number two, the BJP has a history of initiating raids, of initiating cases. We have seen that qua the opposition leaders, so many parties, allies of the India Alliance, have been targeted because the BJP wants to suppress their voice. This is their modus operandi. When the Bharatiya Janata Party has criticism, they have their own way of responding to that. So in the cases of people, in the cases of protests, they would do away with the internet, they would do away with the SMS, they would do away with the services. In the cases of opposition, they would initiate cases. In the case
Where's the solution?
In the case,
where's the solution?
I'll tell you what the solution is. In the first place, try to listen to the people so that they do not have to protest.
Again, this is pretty weak kind of a defense which you are giving.
People to decide. I'll tell you what's weak.
I think that you are completely uninformed of what happens in a situation like this. You are speaking like a very naive person, I'm sorry to say.
When you suppress the voice of people, that is what is weak. When you try to do away with the rights of people,
you don't have a solution then.
You cannot. I'll tell you what the solution is. Number one,
it's only a rant. It's only a rant. It's nothing else. I'm sorry to say.
I'll interrupt you if you interrupt me. Now hear me out. I'll tell you what the solution is to this. Number one, make sure that
30 seconds, 30 seconds, Mr. Khadial.
Please, number one, we need to understand one thing. Why do the people have to protest against the Bharatiya Janata Party's government in the first place? Because they do away with their rights, because they suppress their rights. And after that, they do not even want the people to peacefully protest. However, But if the Bharatiya Janata Party would try to establish a bridge between their government, which is sitting at the top, and have a connect with the people at the ground, maybe there would be solutions. Maybe there would be no need for the protests to happen. There would be no need for you to censure them. There would be no need for you to suppress them. Try to go out instead of just campaigning all the time.
Okay.
Try to listen to the people instead of doing man ki
Mr.
baat all
Baria,
the
you have a
time.
right to respond. 30 seconds. I'm totally out of time. I have to go to Karuna Nandi to ask her a very important question. Please, Mr. Baria, 30 seconds.
I would say that unfortunately the spokesperson from Congress is not seized as far as this matter is concerned.
More than 15 days.
He's not speaking to the
Do you
point,
understand the law?
and he doesn't have anything new to really add.
How
What are the
do
solutions to it?
How do you
So
suspend
it
the
boils down-
internet for more
Mr.
than
Khadia,
15
30
days?
seconds is
to
what
the
I've given
issues
Mr.
you are
Baria. Let him
discussed.
respond, please.
And
Advocate Khadia, 30
every time
seconds is what I've
Bharatiya
given him.
Janata
Let him
Party doesn't
respond,
matter. It's a
please.
national situation. Look at beyond the party lines. Look at what's good for the country and how do you really come
I
out
have
with
one
a solution
question
which
for
is
him.
solid and fair to both the parties. I
The
think
order
that's
has to
more
be reviewed
important.
by
I
the
would say.
committee after 15 days.
Okay,
The order is
okay.
to be
Let me
reviewed
get in
by a
Karuna
committee
Nandi,
after
please, at this
15
point. And Ms. Karuna Nandi, I understand you're not a digital activist. You're not an expert in this space. But I want a legal lens again. Because let's look at these long periods of internet suspensions that we have. And as we've had the graphics and I've been quoting it all across the country, particularly recent instances of Manipur, J&K, Kargil, Ladakh, so on and so forth. But the point is this. Court has given certain directives. It should be temporary, limited, lawful, necessary, proportionate, so on and so forth. But nowhere the court has struck this down as well. Court has not said that this is illegal, that the internet suspensions have been illegal. The court hasn't done that either.
Okay, so firstly, I just must clarify that I think you and I end up talking a fair bit about gender, but I argued along with other counsel, the definitive online case that still stands today. I defended the first regulation that has blockchain in it, so I do a lot of work in this space. Here's the thing though, which is that, I was hearing effectively the BJP representative speaking, and every time there is any discussion about speech in particular or other such freedoms, what right-wing governments, and to be fair, this is not just the BJP, this is also Trump, this is also others, what they say is they raise some kind of straw man of fear. And they say that, look, if you speak, if we allow people to speak, this absolutely terrible thing will happen and people will die, right? And so what did this gentleman who came before me said? He said, I have friends in the army. And friends in the army have told me that people will die. And there is no alternative. So everyone else, this is in the national interest. It is about the nation, so you cannot say anything. I think what they forget is that the nation is comprised of a huge number of people. And without the people, the nation is nothing. This happened during demonetization, but I will leave that aside for a minute. When you shut down the internet and you have people dying because they can't access health services, and you have to see how many people are dying versus how many people are in your perceived threat perception for what you have called a law and order situation, which is different for the lawyers watching. Public order is different from law and order, right? And so if it's Badlapur, you're saying that, oh, this could go out of control, there could be riots, it could be terrible. And then you shut down the internet because the protest is against you, let's face it. But even if we take what they are saying as a given that they are worried about riots, look at the number of people dying because they can't access the internet. And demonetization, about 100 people have documented to have died while waiting in line. So when we say these are not just grand constitutional principles, see? When we say that the restriction must be necessary and proportionate, I can give you a concrete example now. A concrete example is if you are looking to spread misinformation, looking to curtail misinformation, counter it with correct information. You are the government of India. When you want, you can have everyone's phone begin with saying, Jhanda lehrayenge, right? Or Modi ji ko congratulate karenge. So why can you not, at the outset, have a message saying that there is misinformation happening, here is the correct information, and go by it? That's just one simple solution. And so what we need is for government to be accountable. That where there is internet shutdown, we need government and people like the gentleman before me to show up and to say, we had to shut it down. We looked at these other alternatives. It wasn't possible. This was the only alternatives. And 9 times out of 10, this will not be the answer.
Manish Bariyar, quick response before we end the show. Manish Bariyar.
Yeah, so I didn't hear any solution as such, which was claimed. That is one. And second, these suspensions, I don't know if they're aware, they're very, very localized, sometimes to the tune of 100 meters to 200 meters radius. So I don't know if they're
localized.
aware that,
No, Mr. Bariyar, I don't think I can agree with you on that account. They are not localized. That's factually incorrect, Mr. Bariyar.
It's incorrect, Mr.
No, Mr. Manish Bariyar, when we have the facts on our screens, these are not localized. Localized also is an issue. I'm not saying the way the suspensions have happened in India, even if it is localized, it's fine.
No,
it can't be. Nonetheless, these are not localized suspensions.
I didn't say that, but a lot of them are quite localized, and that too, those operations are done for a couple of days.
No.
So numbers might look high, but then apart from Manipur,
Mr. Bariyar, I think it's going to be very hard to justify that sentence factually. But
right now, problematic places, difficult places, you won't find too many places in our country really having this problem.
A committee has to review it every 15 days. Tell me the last time the committee reviewed it. Tell me one instance.
Manish Bariyar?
No, I'm sorry. I'm not able to hear properly, so I won't be able to respond. Really sorry for that. I'm not able to get the voice.
So Mr. Kharyal has said, according to the directive, according to the regulation, a committee has to review the internet shutdown every 15 days. So if it has been extended beyond the 15 days, would you be able to cite examples of when it was reviewed last time before the extension happened in the cases where we have seen these long extensions?
Never. No answer to that, of course.
Mr. Bariyar?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear. Your voice is quite low.
Okay,
today.
Mr. Kharyal, let Mr. Bariyar answer. Let Mr. Bariyar answer, Mr. Kharyal. Yes, Manish Bariyar, please go ahead.
Yeah, can you repeat the question? Because I was not getting your sound.
No, and so Mr. Kharyal has asked that every time an internet suspension extension has to be done, it has to be reviewed every 15 days. So if the review is happening every 15 days, could you cite an example of such a review that's happened on a regular basis and it's been made public?
Google it.
I'm sorry. You know what I can say that I do not agree with this suspension over a long period of time, which I said in my starting sentence. And wherever it happens, I think I would not support that. So I'm not in support of this internet suspension for a very long period of time.
All right.
I made it very clear. But I also feel that for national security, for diffusing the situation, this is something which is required and it cannot be criticized point blank. If you have a solution, great. But if you do not have a solution, you have to live it with that for some period of time till the situation improves in those places.
Okay.
Our solutions, Mr. Kharyal, and
some period of time is the real problem here. But Karuna Nandi, go ahead, please.
What I just want to say is that there are multiple solutions, right? There are many countries in the world. There are many countries in the world that face situations where there are mass protests, there is violence, there is
not
misinformation.
Like
there is
I'm
the possibility.
You tell me a place like Kashmir is there. Or you can talk about internet suspension in Palestine. You can understand what's happening out there. So it's a situation which was very, very
okay,
bad.
Mr. Bariyar, I gave you your time. We did not interrupt. Kindly allow Ms. Karuna Nandi to speak.
Sure.
Look, here's the thing. We must ask ourselves why we are #1 in the world for 6 years in succession and why our internet shutdowns have affected 59.1 million people and have lost us, and we are not a rich country, $585 million. And this is just in the last 30 internet shutdowns. When Mr. Bariyar says that we must have an alternative. Now, I understand, look, he's a policy analyst, he's a journalist, but he's not the government. The onus is on the government to explore the most restrictive alternative. I have given, during the course of this conversation, 3 possible alternatives that Mr. Bariyar has not heard, but his internet is not working very well, unfortunately. So when all one is saying is that don't use this as a blunderbuss tool. Use it
I
like
agree
a
with you.
scalpel, only where necessary. And you will not be, there are other countries in the world, there are other governments that face protests, that face possible violence, that face disinformation, and they deal with it in a different way, 3 of which I have listed. So therefore, our government needs to stop just going to internet shutdowns and blacking everything out, making people even more poverty-stricken, taking away people's healthcare, taking away people's education, when there are alternatives, and government must tell us what alternatives were explored before they shut the internet down. Because the people of Manipur have suffered enough. And there has been
All right,
very
we're
little
running out
intervention.
of time, Ms. Karunanandi.
Very little intervention, and now this is making it worse.
Thank you very much. Right, Karunanandi, Advocate APS Kharial and Manish Bariyar, thank you very much for your time. I think one important thing we must remember, and that's what I would like to leave our panelists and our viewers with, just repeating one simple fact. A 2023 report of Keep It On Coalition says that India is leading the world in internet shutdowns for the 6th year in a row, literally nothing short of an internet shutdown capital. Thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you very much for our viewers for joining.